Hi guys, so for this blanket I'm going to use yarn in two different colors. The yarn is in size 4 medium by Cairn 1 pound. So I used 6 balls of this yarn, but I attached them together, like I used 2 strands together. You want it to be pretty long because we have 170 stitches we need to chain. But because this is just a sample, I'm going to chain less, but everything else will be the same, the pattern and everything. But you know, imagine knitting 170 stitches on the camera, that would take long. But for the main project, we need 170, and of course less if you want a smaller blanket. And I used circular knitting needles in size 9 millimeters or US 13. I used, I don't know, those are like, I forgot how many inches was the cable. I believe either 28 or 30, I'm not sure. It's better to use circular knitting needles for this project, even though we're not working on round, because it's a blanket and you want the stitches to rest on this cable, because if it's straight needle, it'll be a hassle unless they are very long. So we started by leaving a long tail. Now make a slip stitch. Now for this stitch you need to have the even amount of stitches. So this one counts as 1. Well, here, since this is a sample, I just casted on 16 stitches. For original one, I believe I casted 170. So now for row 1, I'll turn my work around, and then I'll start by purling 1 stitch. So we purl 1, then knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1. So I'll continue purling 1 and knitting 1 throughout row 1. Knit and purl any way you know how. There is no correct way of purling and knitting. You just have to do how you were taught from the start. And about your background, it speaks more of that. So this completes row 1. Now for row 2, I'll turn my work around. And the reason we need even amount of stitches is because every row should start with the purl 1. Now for row 2, I'll start by purling 1 and then knit 1 below. Normally we'll knit right here through this stitch, but for this pattern we need to knit 1 below. Again, purl 1, knit 1 below, purl 1, knit 1 below, purl 1, knit 1 below, purl 1, knit 1 below. So we'll continue purling 1 and knitting one below throughout row 2. And this is a 2-row repeat pattern. It will take a few rows for you to see the pattern forming, so don't get discouraged right away. It always used to be my problem as when I was younger. I was like, oh, but my stitches don't look larger than they do in somebody else's work for this pattern. But I didn't realize that it actually takes few rows to see it. Now for row 3, we'll start by purling 1, knit 1 below, purl 1, knit 1 below, purl 1, knit 1 below. Now I realize that this sounds like a 1-row repeat, but it isn't, even though it sounds like that. Don't be deceived. So you see these knit 1 below stitches from this side. On the other side, in the previous row, they were purled. And the purl stitch on this side was knitted 1 below in the previous row. So again, we'll continue to purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1. We just continue purling 1 and knitting 1 throughout row 3. But when it comes to the last stitch, we always have to knit it. So remember, the stitch in the beginning of row always should be purled. The stitch on the last row should only be knitted, so don't knit 1 below the last stitch. Okay, so now for the pattern, we repeat rows 2 and 3. I'll make 1 more row, just because. So for row 4, I'll start by purling 1, knitting 1 below, purl 1, knit 1 below. And now I'll go a bit faster because I already showed you what you have to do here. Just knit 1, purl 1 below, knit 1, purl 1 below. And this pattern is like very thick, chunky, I think some people call it, but it's super soft. Generally, patterns that are thick, not patterns, but the work, or yeah, pattern and work that are solid and thick, sometimes don't have much flexibility. Not sometimes, actually more often, but that's mostly when it comes to crochet. So this, for first few rows, it won't be very soft. It will be softer than a lot of other patterns, but it will take like at least 7 or 8 rows for you to see it sort of like opening like a harmonica. I don't know, maybe that's why I like this pattern so much, because it's just it's always in motion. So yeah, for the pattern we repeat rows 2 and 3, and then we repeat rows 2 and 3 until our blanket reaches our desired length. That's totally up to you how long you want it. So after our blanket reaches our desired length, we will finish it off. Again, we'll start by purling the first stitch, knitting 1 below. Then with the left needle, we'll pull this first stitch and pass it over the second stitch. Then we'll purl the next stitch. Again, we'll insert the left needle through this first stitch and pass it over the second stitch. Sorry about that fly earlier. I left the window open and she just flew in. Again, we'll knit the next stitch 1 below. She's around my camera. Again, now this left needle will insert it through its first stitch and pass it over the second stitch. Again, I'll purl the next stitch, then I insert this needle through its first stitch and pass it over the second stitch. Again, the next stitch we knit one below, then this left needle I insert it through its first stitch and pass it over the second stitch. Purl the next stitch, insert the left needle through its first stitch and pass it over the second stitch. Now this next stitch we knit one below, then I insert this left needle through its first stitch and pass it over the second stitch. So this way we can still continue working the pattern through this last row as well as finish it off. Make sure not to make those stitches too tight. It is the last row, a finisher off row. So we just repeat this until we reach the last stitch. So now that I have only one stitch left, I will chain one, leave a medium size tail, then we'll cut this yarn. Then we will weave these ends in. 6 So I used 6 balls of Cairn 1-pound yarn. So I used 2 strands together because I wanted it to have a thicker appearance. Since it's a blanket, I really wanted to be secure. You know, those ends that we weave in, I want them to be extra secure. So soft. It feels like a cloud. So this is how this blanket looks, guys. I'm not gonna make no border stitch around, so this is gonna leave it as it is. I think it looks fine. So it's 80 inches wide and 88 inches long. I should have made it a bit longer, but I think it'll be fine. Oh, very cool. So soft. I wish you guys can feel it. It really feels so soft. So this is all for today, guys, and I'll see you next time with another video.